Episode High Adventures with Katherine. Adventures in the States. While we lived in Sammamish, Washington, when I worked for Microsoft, we made a day trip of driving to Mount St. Helens for a sightseeing, adventure, and a hike. It is amazing how far the destruction of St. Helens volcanic eruption reached, and how absolutely devastating it was. Not only was there lava from that volcano that erupted that flowed and burned over a vast distance, but the volcano blew out an entire section of its own caldera and sent concussive fiery winds that both uprooted and bent trees with flames and incineration. It left behind husks, burnt crisps, sticks of firewood. Ash was sent so high into the air that it rained down well over 10 miles, and winds carried ash for over hundreds of miles, raining down far, far away from the volcano and its eruption. It was an awe-inspiring place to see. It really demonstrated how powerful Mother Nature and God can be. Katherine and I decided one weekend to explore the inner area of British Columbia while we were living in Canada. We decided to go to a place called Kamloops in BC, British Columbia, Canada. It was surreal, the drive, seeing snow-capped mountains as we drove. They looked just too perfect, like an artist had rendered them without any flaws. They did not seem real. Like I said, it was a very surreal drive. We finally reached our destination in Kamloops. We had no reservations, as we thought a hotel in the middle of nowhere would have a vacancy. Well, we walked into the hotel lobby and asked for a room. However, the woman looked at me and looked at my Mercedes convertible, and her face contorted and appeared disgusted. She snarled, "We have no rooms." I felt like she was really saying to me, "We have no rooms for you." I asked if there were other hotels in the area, to which she barked, "There are no hotels that you can stay at." Even her choice of words was aggressive and offensive. There were no hotels that you could stay at. But we had our answer. There was no place in Kamloops for us. So we turned around and we drove back into the wee hours to return home, aborting our plan to stay and visit Kamloops. Well, we did get to our destination. It was driving a lot, and I cannot say that Canadians in Kamloops are friendly, eh? While living in Vancouver, Canada, we lived near a small ski resort. It was at the top of a local mountain called Grouse Mountain. During summer months, people would hike from the base of the ski resort on a trail known as the Grouse Grind. I only met one person that extolled their ability to actually complete the grind from the bottom of the mountain all the way to the top where the resort was. I certainly never tried, so I cannot attest to how hard or not the grind was. The biggest attraction, though, to me was that Grouse Mountain had a gondola that transported people from the base to the ski resort, obviously so they did not have to walk the Grouse Grind. It was a cool ride in the gondola, especially when it was snow-capped. The view was amazing, even if it was intimidating, scary. Below Grouse Mountain, not far from where we lived in Vancouver as well, there was a park named Capilano. There were First Nations, the original Native Canadians, historical items and locations in Capilano. But the coolest things by far within the Capilano Park were treetop walkways. They connected huge trees to other trees, forming an entire above-ground walkway among the treetops. There was also a huge suspension bridge over a massive and deep chasm. On another area in the Vancouver area, Katherine and I would go sometimes to hike. It was a place called Deep Cove. It was a quaint area with lots of forest and waterways all around. There was a long suspension bridge in Deep Cove as well. It was not as long as the Capilano suspension bridge, but it was much scarier because it was old, rickety, and did not feel well maintained, if maintained at all. The bridge swayed as you traversed it, definitely making you feel that you could actually fall down to your death. It also did not have any meaningful safety guards or rails, just a handrail. On another weekend trip in Vancouver, Canada, Katherine and I decided to drive to Whistler Blackcomb, the ski resort. We imagined that we would make a same-day trip of it. Well, it began as a sunny day, albeit it was very cold. So I opened the roof of our Mercedes SLK convertible and I cranked the heater up. As we drove, the sky turned a bit overcast, but it was still clear. But then hail, and then snow. It was insane, amazing, a miraculous, wild moment. The skies were clear, but it was raining and snowing. It was snowing over our car as we drove. It was like a wind tunnel moved the snow up and over us and down the back of the car to the ground behind us. We had sort of an airlock that we were in as long as we were moving. But we eventually slowed for traffic, and then the snow fell into the car and on us. We could see people's dismay as they observed the madness of a couple in an open convertible driving as it snowed inside the car onto them. Well, we closed the convertible and eventually turned back. We did not want to slide or get stuck in the snow. On another ski trip at Whistler, Katherine sometimes skied on her own because I was not competent enough to ski where she could. Admittedly, I was bad at skiing. She came across a mountain lion on one of her solo ski runs, and while I would have found that very alarming, she thought it was a miraculous event, a blessing to see such a majestic creature in the wild. Well, I am glad that she saw it, appreciated it, and kept skiing on. While Katherine solo skied, and when I was not in a ski class or putting around on mostly flat snow patches, I played in the snow, like a kid. I pressed, I shaped, and I carved snows into different shapes. I presented Katherine with one of my creations. One of my snowy gifts was a snow heart. I would collect natural hearts ongoing, whether they be leaves, rocks, sticks, even kitty poo. I have always thought anything that formed a heart was some reinforcement of my love for Katherine, and so I would present them to her in some way in honor of her and our love. When we lived in Washington State, we went several times to the tulip fields, especially during the month-long event that occurred in April, all about tulips, called the Tulip Festival. It was always heartwarming to see Katherine's eyes widen and glow, like a little kid wandering and smiling inside the oceans of tulips. It was because of her love of tulips that we bought a tulip auger that could dig deep holes to plant tulips at our home. Every year we planted hundreds of tulips of all colors, even black tulips, so that Katherine, I hoped, would smile and be happy. Katherine and I preferred beach destination vacations if we had more than a weekend available to us. We tended to go on a vacation every few years, trying to make them meaningful versus just a lot of little forgettable excursions. Although we have gone to Mexico, Cabo, and the Mexican Riviera, the Caribbean became our main getaway vacation destination. But let me just throw a few things about Cabo and the Mexican Riviera. Let's talk about some Mexico highlight adventures. Near our resort, a woman waded into the beach waves in Cabo and somehow had a wave crash down on her with such force that it knocked her over. And she broke her neck. and I believe she died. When at a snorkeling trip, where Katherine went on a tour without me because I stayed behind, but I wanted to support her adventure in snorkeling, I did not want to exacerbate cuts that I had developed on my feet from my swimming flippers earlier in our vacation. But it was weird. Armed Mexican soldiers with assault rifles marched along the beach and right on by where I was sitting. The tour operators later explained the military was practicing rescuing civilians from a hotel that was a simulation of a cartel takeover. Yeah, Mexico was apparently so unsafe that the military was practicing rescuing tourists from an invaded, captured hotel by cartels. Wow. During one of our trips, we were surprised to be stopped by the local policia, the Mexican police. The policia were looking for drug smugglers, and they searched everyone on the bus, except for a few of us. We were told to remain on the bus. They never explained why we were spared, or why our possessions were not strewn out along the side of the road for inspection like everyone else, or why we were not patted down and searched. I learned later our resort armband that identified us as belonging to a specific resort was also a symbol that we were protected tourists. Mexico, even cartels, needs tourism, and so they make sure, apparently, to not harass or extort valuable, nice resort tourists. They needed them to come back. In fact, the hotel explained that we needed to show those bands whenever we were on the beach, because beaches were public, and people needed to know not to harass us. And with that, we were off, and we returned to our safe and protected resort. There were some cool things. We visited the coastal Mayan ruins near a beach called Tulum. We saw Chichen Itza's Mayan pyramid. We saw majestic underground semi-open cisterns full of water called cenotes. In many areas, people were allowed to enter and swim these cenotes. Locals dove from on high, hoping for tips from tourists. We saw monkeys and wildlife. Katherine even had a trained monkey sit on her shoulder. She is such an adventurer. Well, let's talk about some of the Caribbean adventures. We went to St. Lucia, the Bahamas, and to Jamaica in the Caribbean. We went to Cabo San Lucas and the Mexican Riviera, like I said. We've driven dune buggies, jet skis, and segways. All awesome experiences. Katherine parasailed from a powerboat and was almost dragged into the mast of another boat. But she loved the adventure and the experience of it, danger aside. We went on excursions, boating, snorkeling, and the like. Katherine even played with a monkey. It sat on her shoulder. We ate authentic jerk chicken. And of course, we went on so many sightseeing expeditions. Oh, and I had a few incidents as well on our adventures in the Caribbean. Once I became so ill that I had to go to a resort doctor for medications and treatment. Another time, I was maliciously drugged and consequently collapsed and ended up in a hospital, forced to receive IV fluids and more just to survive. We also encountered a cliché crazy taxi driver. His taxi was on the edge of breaking down, and he knew it, but he was the only taxi we could find. He assured us not to worry. He had a tool bag in the back of the taxi, and he knew how to fix most anything on the taxi. It was all part of the color, the texture of our adventures. In St. Lucia, I recall a huge, big billboard sign as we went towards our hotel of a group of men holding shotguns. Yeah, the billboard had a big portrait of a bunch of men holding shotguns. It had text that said, "When you need protection, you know who to call." Yeah, St. Lucia had a rough side. It was obvious.